American journalists and other human falderall are claiming that Democrat men are, quote unquote, redefining masculinity. And no, I'm not making that quote up. Jen Psaki said Pissot on our Psaki Show on MPSNBC. And there have been similar headlines in USA Today and other trusted news outlets, or at least outlets trusted by the same sort of people who think, okay, this time I'm sure I know which card is the queen. I'll bet another $20. So let's take a look at the Democrat men these journalists are talking about. One example is Doug Emhoff, who will be first gentleman if Kamala Harris wins the election, which definitely does redefine masculinity, if by that you mean eliminates it completely. I mean, holy crap, it's bad enough to be married to Kamala Harris, but now you have to go to parties and people say, what do you do? And you're like, I'm the first gentleman. And they sort of simper and say, oh, how wonderful, you're redefining masculinity. But what they're really thinking is this poor guy must have a package the size of a mustard seed. So now you're lying awake at night in a Lincoln bedroom or wherever, staring at the ceiling and wondering how you got to a place where technically you're still a man, I guess, but not only are you the king cuck of the universe, but you also have to listen to that laugh Kamala has until you start thinking, hey, she's guarded by the same Secret Service that guarded Donald Trump. So basically, she's got no protection. I could still get out of this. Okay, I kind of went off on a tangent there, and I'm not sure what point I was trying to make, but let's remember that Mr. Doug redefining masculinity actually cheated on his last wife with the nanny until she got pregnant and had an abortion, which sounds to me like the same old Democrat definition of masculinity as always. And now he's also been accused of slapping his former girlfriend after she flirted with another man at a party. That raises some interesting questions, right? For instance, you might ask, well, is it always wrong to smack your girlfriend? And yes, of course it is. And you might ask, but what if she's like really, really annoying? Like Kamala Harris level annoying with that laugh and everything. And I would say still, you don't just slap her. It's not like she's your wife where the occasional swat on the backside is probably cheaper than a divorce. She's your girlfriend. You can dump her if she's that much trouble. And you might say, well, okay, what if she's a journalist? And not just any journalist, but like one of those two dames who moderated the vice presidential debate and sat there all night with those prissy little smiles on their faces while skewing all the questions in a leftist direction and then cutting off J.D. Vance's microphone when he tried to correct their so-called fact check, which was against the rules in the first place. And okay, look, there are always gray areas, but if you're dating a girl who's a journalist, you might want to take a good look in the mirror before you just get handsy with her. The problem could be you, my friend. Anyway, the question is, are Democrat men really redefining masculinity, or are they just a bunch of sleazeballs? Because not only do you have Doug Emhoff banging the nanny, then playing ping pong face with a flirty girlfriend, but you've also got Tim Walz, and oh my God, right? Talk about a guy who's redefining masculinity to the point where it could become a capital offense. I mean, is there something creepy about that dude or what? I don't want to go too far here. If it turned out Walsh had like an oubliette in his basement with his next victim already down there praying to God Clarice Starling can find her before it's too late, I would be surprised. But only maybe 30% surprised. Maybe 20, if that. So, in conclusion, Democrat men are redefining masculinity. Yeah. Either that or Democrat women are cucking them nutless to keep from getting smacked in the kisser. Trigger warning. I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. Oh my God, that was a horrible, horrible thing to say. I'm embarrassed to be on this show. And if you'd like to see more and get 47% off a new Daily Wire Plus membership, you use code FIGHT at dailywire.com/subscribe. You'll get uncensored, I'm not kidding, obviously, uncensored, unfiltered, ad-free shows, real-time breaking news alerts, and more. But most importantly, you'll get the truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. Head to dailywire.com/subscribe to join the fight now. All right, we are back. The vast right-wing conspiracy known as Klavanon continues. I have some good news about A Woman Underground, the new Cameron winter mystery coming out on October 15th. As always, I forgot to bring it in so I could display the book, but you can see it on Amazon, and it is now the Amazon editor's pick for best mystery and suspense novel of October. This is the second Cameron Winter novel in a row that was an editor's pick. So please make this book a bestseller. Pre-order it now. The more you pre-order it, the more those pre-sales go into the record on the first day of publication, and that helps us get onto the bestseller list. Obviously not the New York Times, they won't let us on, but USA Today might, and it publishes weekly, the real ones that actually just count the number of books. So please help it out. It makes a big difference about whether this series will continue for as long as I want it to continue. And if you'd like to also support the book and say hi, I will be at the Landmark Bookstore in Franklin, Tennessee on Thursday, October 17th at 6 p.m. with someone named Spencer Klavan, no relation. He has got a book coming out on the exact same day. We did not plan this, but they both have the same pub date. His book is called Light of the Mind, Light of the World. It's absolutely terrific, and we'll have a conversation at the Landmark Bookstore in Franklin, Tennessee, October 17th, a Thursday at 6 p.m. Then on Monday, October 21st, I'll be at my home bookstore, the Mysterious Bookshop in downtown Manhattan at 58 Warren Street. That's also at 6 p.m. And you will get to meet Otto Penzler, the editor who keeps my career going. He was absolutely the greatest mystery editor of his day, which I think was about 1860. But he'll be there as well. And we will talk about the Woman Underground. And please, again, pre-order it. And by the way, we had this, we did a Mysterious Bookshop event last time with the last book, and it was great. It was just so many people there, and I got to meet so many of you. I really liked it. But the other thing you want to do is wherever you're listening to the show, DailyWire Plus or YouTube or anywhere else, leave a comment. And if the comment is absolutely disgusting, morally and actually just in terms of the language you use and everything like that, we will read it on the show because it'll fit in with the rest of our content. Today's comment is from Big Dumpy White Guy. I thought that was me. No, it's Big Dumpy White Guy 7467. So there must be 7,000 other Big Dumpy White Guys leaving comments. But this one is, I Googled where to buy a Woman Underground, and the FBI showed up at my house with Tulsi Gabbard and a shovel. We get that a lot. That happens a lot. So be careful how you buy the book, but please do pre-order it. All right, let's get to today's episode, J.D. Vance versus the American Nightmare. And because the show is on only once a week, and I'm following a train of thought here over the weeks, I want to just, again, bring you up to date, connect all the stuff I've been talking about. I think it was several weeks ago, I did a segment on the show about the fact that social justice movements make everything worse, make life in America worse, and they don't make it worse because of their purported goals. They make it worse because of their real goal, which is always leftism. And feminism is the great example. It makes women miserable, not because it's feminist, like I'm feminist, in other words, concerned that women thrive as both individuals and as women in America and everywhere else. That's what I want. Feminism is just leftism. Its goal is the destruction of marriage and the destruction of family and the transformation of women into economic Marxist objects instead of the reason that economies exist, which is women. Economies exist to support the family and support the home, which usually has been guarded over and run by women. And that would be feminism as feminism, but feminism is just leftism. Same thing with anti-racism. They say it's going to be about, making blacks and whites better friends, but obviously it's not about race. It's about sowing division in order to weaken the individual and strengthen the government. And blacks are told that they can't survive without the government. It's always about shoveling more power into the government. And so all these things, environmentalism, another one, we all want clean air and water, right? Nobody wants a dirty world, but what they want is climate change panic, because that's another reason to funnel more power into the government. So all these things sound good, and over time make things worse. And people keep saying, well, how can feminism, you keep getting these headlines, women much less happy, even though there's so much feminism. Not even though, it's because there's feminism, because feminism is really leftism and it degrades women, it doesn't uplift them. So the reason leftism makes things worse, because it sounds so good, it sounds like, it wants more equality, more power for the powerless, but it's based on so many things that aren't true. And that's one of the themes that we've been talking about these last weeks, of how lies just make things worse. And this is something that grows directly out of Marxism. Now, I'm simplifying. I know that Marx is not a simplistic philosopher. But one thing about him is he wanted philosophy. Marx said this. He said philosophy up till his time had been observational. Guys like Plato, they were trying to describe the world, trying to say what reality was about, what was really going on. But he wanted philosophy to be revolutionary. He wanted philosophy to change the world by changing people's consciousness. So if you stopped seeing yourself as just a worker in a factory, but you started to see yourself as the source of the value of the factory, then you would start to demand more power in that factory. And ultimately, you could tell if a philosophy was true by whether it led to a Marxist revolution. So it was the backwards, right? It was not, oh, there should be a Marxist revolution because that's good. It's philosophy is good if it leads to a Marxist revolution. And so you wanted to change people's minds regardless of the truth, because the only truth was the desire to get to a Marxist revolution. And so you want to change people's consciousness, and you want to change the world by changing people's consciousness, but you don't care if what they believe is true, as long as, in the sense that you and I mean true. You only care that it's true in the sense that it supports a Marxist revolution. So that's why, you see a lot of these things. All of this grows out of this. It's not. It grows from Marx. That's why you see an academic come out and say women can be men, and suddenly everybody goes, oh yeah, if you don't believe that, you're an evil person. And you think, like, wait a minute. 10 minutes ago, that wasn't true. Why is it I'm suddenly an evil person for saying that's obviously untrue? And it's the point is they are trying to change. They're not trying to say a thing that's true. They're trying to change the truth because they don't actually believe there is a truth. And so if they can change the narrative, they change the truth. And the problem is that Marx was right. If you can change people's ideas, you can change their behavior. But he left out the fact that if their ideas are not in keeping with reality, their change in behavior will be for the worse. If you convince people there's no gravity, yes, they will act in a different way, but it's not going to end well. And the same is true if you convince people that there's no such thing as gender. And the greatest fallacy of Marxism is the underlying materialism, because it conceives of people as stuff, as things, and their inner life is just a creation of their social and economic structure. So once you fix that, everything is going to be great. It doesn't account for sin. It doesn't account for the human desire. It doesn't account for the spiritual desires of human beings. All that is just mysticism, Marx would say. It's just a lie. So these last few weeks, we've talked about the fact that our elites signed on to this philosophically leftist agenda, and that really includes some on the right, the Republicans as well as the Democrats. They've all signed on to this idea to some degree, and the welfare, the feminism, the anti-racism, the climate change hysteria. And since all those ideas have failed and are failing, and yet the people in power depend on those ideas to keep their power, they have to lie because they still are clinging to this idea that if they can just change your mind, then all those things will work. The problem is you. And that explains why you're being treated the way you're being treated, like you're dirt, like you don't matter, like they just need to replace you with some hopefully uneducated Mexicans, and they can form them so they'll say, oh, how wonderful this is, and then they get to keep their power even though everything is going badly. And look, the last part of this is that people are weak, people are corrupted, we're sinful people, and we want to be lied to. We want to confirm our fantasies. And this is true of all people. We all want our fantasies confirmed, and that gives them a certain power over us and draws us in. So today I want to look at how our fantasies are maintained in the face of the truth. All right, let's talk about Balance of Nature. I love these guys because a lot of people don't eat even half the recommended serving sizes of fruits and vegetables in a day. And if you look at me, the reason I look like I'm still in my 20s is because I know that you have to keep on top of your health as you move into your extended youth, And with Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables on a daily basis. You can't eat 31 different fruits and vegetables every day. It would be miserable, it'd be time-consuming, kind of messy. But Balance of Nature provides an on-the-go solution by taking 31 different fruits and vegetables, freeze-drying them, turning them into a powder, and then putting them into a capsule. It can't get more convenient than that. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Klavan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Klavan, spelled, guess. All right, I'll tell you. It's Klavan.
Klavan, there are no E's in Klavan.
All right, chapter 1, taking debate. A little pun there. I'm not going to recover the vice presidential debate. We did that on Backstage brilliantly. But if you want to know just how badly J.D. Vance sliced up the truly weird Tim Walz, listen to this story from Politico. I just love this story. 8 body language tells from the vice presidential debate. Body language revealed even more than words on the debate stage. And this is because they want to stay in this fantasy world where J.D. Vance couldn't possibly have just decimated Tim Walz, as Walz just lied about almost everything. Almost every word out of his mouth was a lie. So they get an FBI body language expert who works in the office next to the FBI astrology expert, because this is part of this profiling thing. I don't believe profiling has ever led to the arrest of anybody. I don't care how much they put it on TV. I don't care how they show it to you, like, oh, he's the profiler and all that stuff. I don't believe it's ever, like, what do they usually say? If it's a serial killer, it's a white guy. If it's not, it's somebody else. It's ridiculous. Anyway, but he says one of the first bits of the Politico's coverage of this debate. One of the first bits of nonverbal communication to appear in the debate was on J.D. Vance's face, his beard. Research indicates, I love this, research indicates that voters see beards as more masculine. That can be positive to some, reading as strength and competence, but to others, especially women, it can be negative, conveying aggression and opposition to feminist ideals. That's their coverage of the debate. I'm reading it. That's actually what he said. You wonder why the FBI is reduced to arresting abortion protesters. It's because guys like this. And then it says when Walz felt especially passionate about something, he'd open his eyes wide as saucers. Eye popping can sometimes be a sign of surprise, but for Walz, it simply revealed his emotional intensity. This is what he looked like. If you're watching this, you can just see this picture. He was obviously like a deer caught in the headlights. I mean, you don't have to be an expert to know when a guy is caught, because he was getting caught out in lies left and right. So, just to translate this Political story, Vance made Walz look like the creepy and dishonest guy he is. But I don't want to talk about what Vance and Walz did. Like I said, we did that at Backstage. I want to talk about the fantasy world in which the debate took place. Listen to the questions. Listen to the way these corrupt leftist reporters, journalists, quote unquote, asked these questions. Here's Norah O'Donnell from CBS on Hurricane Helene, which has devastated the South. I mean, still, people are dying, people are stranded, towns are washed away. And here's the way she asked a question about that storm. Cut 2.
Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change?
Now, that's a lie. It's just not true. I mean, here I'm going to read from Bjorn Lomborg, the sensible environmentalist. He says, despite what you may hear over and over again, Atlantic hurricanes are not becoming more frequent. In fact, the frequency of hurricanes making landfall in the continental United States has declined slightly since 1900, and there aren't more powerful hurricanes either. The frequency of Category 3 and above hurricanes making landfall since 1900 is also trending slightly down. And so, again, remember, environmentalism, like all of these other movements, is not care for the planet, which we agree with. It's leftism under the guise of something we agree with. And that makes you miserable because its underlying assumptions are incorrect. And meanwhile, Joe Biden spent the storm at his beach house. He said, they asked him about it. He said, what do you mean? I was on the phone for 2 hours. Do you remember how George W. Bush was crucified during Hurricane Katrina because he only flew over New Orleans before going to visit it? He flew over and took a look around. They thought, oh my gosh, these people are eating each other. And they made up all these stories about black people. It was really racist, but they just weren't true. People were eating each other and all this crazy stuff. And it was all George W. Bush's fault. They're not covering this at all. And the people in these areas in North Carolina, in Georgia, they are saying that they are getting no help from the federal government. Kamala Harris unbelievably did this photo op. She did a photo op on the scene after a while. But so help me, I'm sure you've seen this. She had her picture taken in a plane where her her headphones. She was wearing headphones and they weren't plugged in. She was cosplaying the vice president working on the storm. And mostly she was really doing fundraisers, whereas Trump went to Georgia and started a GoFundMe that raised millions of dollars. And Alexander Mayorkas of Homeland Security says FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. This is FEMA, which has spent, this is Homeland Security, which spent more than $1 billion resettling illegals and migrants who are illegal. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they're not showing up for these Americans. Kamala said, we'll give $750 to each of these Americans. That was emergency funding. And under the inflation in the Kamala Biden administration, $750, I think, will buy you a dozen eggs. So they ask about climate change. That's the entire question. The entire question was a lie. So already J.D. Vance, in order to answer the question honestly, would have to go back and disassemble the lie. He would have to have those facts on hand about hurricanes not getting any stronger and just have to say, no, Nora, this is untrue. He'd have to lose all the audience that has been convinced by people like Nora that this is true. He would lose all that. He can't even get out of the web of the question to establish the truth. And this is where conservatives are constantly being held. Personally, I don't understand why they have to be journalists. They're crooked. They're corrupt. Everything about them is dirty. They're just elites protecting elites. They're the powerful protecting the powerful. Why are they at debates? Can't two men or a man and a woman or two women or whatever, two people get together and have a debate by certain rules and stick to those rules and talk to each other? Of course they can. They do not need journalists talking about this. So, all right, so we're speaking about migrants and illegals. And here's how Margaret Brennan asked about that. This is cut 3.
The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil?
So let's parse that sentence for a minute. All right, let's parse that question. The illegals pouring over the border since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris took office are one of the top concerns of Americans. Mr. Vance, Senator Vance, you're going to have the army come in and rip children out of the arms of their mothers. Can you explain how cruel you are, please? Now, it's true. They always do this. The first part of the sentence is always true. It is true that illegal immigration is one of the top concerns of Americans. Do you think that that's one of their top concerns? Do you think that that's what they're worried about? Oh my gosh, Donald Trump is going to come in and send these people back, make them obey the law, enforce our laws. Oh my gosh. No, they're sitting around going, these people are ruining our country. They're ruining our homes. They're a drag on our resources. The government is giving them money while leaving Americans in the lurch in North Carolina because they don't care about the South, because they think they're a bunch of rubes who are going to vote for Trump anyway. I don't know what it is they think, but they clearly don't care about them. The press isn't covering the disaster down there the way they covered Katrina when they thought they could use it, and they did use it to undermine the administration of George W. Bush. They certainly don't want to do that to the Bidens. This is just a lot. The question itself is a fantasy. The question itself is creating an atmosphere of untruth in which now Vance has to operate. He can't just come back and say, I'm not going to answer that question. Let's just talk about what you guys are doing, which is what he should say, because it's all a lie. Why are they there? Why are these journalists there? They are there to make sure that the candidates do not step out of the fantasy in which every social movement has to be leftist, in which leftism has some kind of truth to it, in which we are bad people if we don't agree with them. They are there to encase them in that fantasy. And, Walsh's comment, because he can get away with this, because he wants that fantasy to continue, he talks about the Christian idea of loving your neighbor. Now, Jesus said, render the things to Caesar that are Caesar's and the things to God that are God's. He did not mean his words to be taken as a governing philosophy. They are your individual pathway to heaven. They are not the way you can run a government. They're not supposed to be. He said that personally, and so that kind of talk is also nonsense. And then, of course, here was the big one. When J.D. Vance complained about the cat-eating Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, he got this from Margaret Brennan, and they went back and forth. There's cut 4.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Margaret, but
thank you,
Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
So he tried to say it, and he got a lot of it out, but they cut off his mic eventually because he was right and they were wrong, just like in the Trump-Kamala debate when they fact-checked Trump, and Trump was right and they were wrong every single time. Every single time they fact-checked them. In this case, what Vance wanted to say was that the Biden-Harris administration has created an app on your smartphone where if you come in illegally, you can press a button and suddenly you're given parole. You are essentially legalized. And that's not a legal immigrant. And these Haitian migrants are not legal immigrants. They are legal technically, but only because the Biden-Harris administration is not obeying the law. And so all of this stuff, the entire debate, is taking place in a left-wing fantasy world where hurricanes are due to climate change, and the problem with illegals is how sad they'll be when we send them home and make them obey the law, and the illegals aren't illegals because Biden-Harris snapped their fingers on a smartphone and now suddenly they're legal. And you can't win that debate, even though Vance tore Walsh apart in terms of the issues and the presentation and the facts and all of that. Even though he did that and Walsh lied and lied and lied, almost everything he said was a lie, you still can't win because the assumptions are in place and they're enforced by these dishonest journalists who are living that fantasy because they are protecting the elites, because the elites have their power in that fantasy. And if the fantasy is gone, then they'll be gone soon after. Now, I know that for many of you, tossing and turning all night is a frustrating experience. For me, it's just called nighttime. But sometimes I really do want to get to sleep, and that's why I love Beam. It's not just your run-of-the-mill sleep aid. It's a concoction carefully crafted to help you slip into the sweet embrace of rest without, and this is important to me, without the grogginess that often accompanies other sleep remedies. I don't use any other sleep remedies, but I do use Beam when I need it because it tastes good and it works. Beam Dream contains a powerful, all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. And today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their best-selling hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. It's now available in delicious flavors like cinnamon cocoa, chocolate peanut butter, and mint chip. I've tried them all, and better sleep has never tasted better. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk and enjoy before bedtime. And if you find yourself battling the bedtime blues, just give it a try. You will be happy you did. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, take advantage of 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Klavan and use code Klavan at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Klavan with my promo code Klavan for up to 40% off your order. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, you told me how to spell Beam. Anyone can spell Beam, but how do you spell Klavan?
K-L-A-V-A-N, there are no E's in Klavan.
Chapter 2, Jews Defend the Christian World. Now, the thing about foreign policy is that foreign policy also has been existing, our foreign policy has been existing in a fantasy as well. And it's the fantasy that emanates from what they call the blob, which is like the State Department and the intelligence community and all these experts who think they've got it made, even though everything they do continually comes a cropper. Everything they do blows up in their face. Trump came in and made everything better with simple common sense. The guy's no, foreign policy genius. He just basically did what our friend Mike Duran of the Hudson Institute told us about when he did the interview with us a few weeks ago, and he says you got to support our friends and oppose our enemies, but they think they've got this incredible thing figured out. And there's fantasy on both sides. On the right, we have this fantasy of isolationism, that we can do nothing, and then we have the neocons, that we have to do everything. We have to, go and put out every possible fire. But you have to use common sense. You have to support our friends and oppose our enemies. So this week, I'm sorry to say, you'll be disappointed in me to hear that I offended the Jew haters again. I hate to do that because I just love those guys, but apparently I did. I was watching Israel blow up Hezbollah, which is Iran. That's all I always want to say this, and then kill Hamas, which is Iran. And so Iran bombs them ineffectively, but they had to attack them directly because they kept killing their proxies. And that proves that Iran is the enemy. Israel is fighting Iran. That is what is happening in the Middle East. It's not fighting Hamas and Hezbollah. It's not about anti-colonialism. It's not about the Palestinian people who don't exist. There are no Palestinian people. It is about Iran trying to take over the region. That's what it's about. They're fighting the people who chant death to America in the streets. That's who Israel is fighting. And so Joe Biden is, why now the payback, as you know, Israel is already bombing areas in Iran, but while the bombing of Israel by Iran is going on, Joe Biden is asked whether he's gone to the G7. He's been talking to the G7, which is basically Western Europe and Japan and Canada and us. And he's asked by a reporter, would you support Israel responding by attacking Iran's nuclear facilities? And this is what Biden said. This is cut 5.
The answer is no. I think there's things we'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
Now, Israel has quite rightly been flipping Biden the bird in these last few weeks and blowing up people without telling them, and it's been absolutely great. It's been absolutely terrific because these are people who chant death to America. These are our enemies, and I'm happy to see our enemies get killed, okay? And it's amazing that he would tell Israel openly what he thought they should do. You know, it's just bad policy. You don't let your enemies, the people chanting death to America, Iran, our enemy, you don't let them know what you think Israel should do and what they shouldn't do. So I put up a tweet, and I said, an X post, I guess we have to call it now. I said, I just hope Israel can save Western civilization before Western civilization can stop them, because that really is what's going on. What I mean by that is Israel, due to the fact that they're small and don't want to die, they have to fight the people who say death to Israel, because those are the same people who say death to America, whereas we live in this fantasy bubble that is created by our successful destruction of the Nazis and the Soviets. We think we can finesse this somehow. We think there's some brainiac in the State Department who went to an Ivy League school and is stroking his chin, and he thinks, I think we can do other things that instead of opposing our enemies and helping our friends. But all of this has gone bad. It's all gone bad. There was a report from the Institute for Science and International Security. And this is written by a veteran weapons inspector named David Albright, and there was also Sarah Burkhard was one of the authors, basically saying that I'll read a little bit of it. U.S. intelligence is shielding the Biden-Harris administration from having to take serious action on Iran's nuclear program. For years, they clamored repeatedly that Iran was not, quote, currently undertaking the key nuclear weapons development activities that would be necessary to produce a testable nuclear device. Now that has shifted slightly to Iran has undertaken activities that better position it to produce a nuclear device if it chooses to do so. And what the report is saying, that Iran can now break out quickly in days to creating nuclear weapons, to be on the way to creating nuclear weapons using only one facility that is deeply buried. In other words, all of the stuff about Obama's nuclear deal was doing you're never allowed to say conservatives were right. Conservatives were right. This was just setting Iran up to do this stuff. He was doing it on purpose because he supports Iran. He supports Iran taking over the Middle East. That was his plan. He had this anti-colonial theory based on a leftist fantasy that powerful people are bad and less powerful people are good. So everything is our fault because we're powerful. It's amazing I know that Marx was a sophisticated thinker in some ways, but it's amazing how when you break down some of this stuff, how simplistic it is. Powerful bad, not powerful good, which is just not true, right? I mean, sometimes savages are savages, and sometimes powerful, civilized people are spreading great ideas. Even foreign policy, though, isn't foreign policy. It's leftism. It's just leftism, and it doesn't work, and it's very dangerous when it doesn't work. I was talking about Dinesh D'Souza, I think it was last week. He was given 8 months incarcerated in a halfway house for a minor campaign contribution violation where he hid, he gave over the amount that he was supposed to give, something like $20,000. And normally they would just give the money, take the money back or fine him or something like this. And they put him in a halfway house for 8 months and then put him on probation. And they did that because he called out Obama for his philosophy. I said he did it in Bloomberg, but he did it in Forbes. I always misrecall that. He did it in Forbes magazine. And what Dinesh said was this. I'll read you a little bit of this article that came out during the Obama administration. He said, anti-colonialism is the doctrine that rich countries of the West got rich by invading, occupying, and looting poor countries of Asia, Africa, and South America. Anti-colonialists hold that even when countries secure political independence, they remain economically dependent on their former captors. It may seem incredible to suggest that the anti-colonial ideology of Barack Obama Sr., Obama's father, is espoused by his son, the President of the United States. It's remarkable, incredible, because it meant the President of the United States was anti-American, which Obama was. And Dinesh says, that is what I'm saying. From a very young age and through his formative years, Obama learned to see America as a force for global domination and destruction. President of the United States saw America as a force for global domination and destruction. He came to view America's military as an instrument of neo-colonial occupation. He adopted his father's position that capitalism and free markets are code words for economic plunder. If that weren't true, they would not have put Dinesh D'Souza in prison in a halfway house for 8 months for a minor campaign violation. Just like if what some of the stuff that Steve Bannon is saying weren't true, they would not have jailed him for not accepting a congressional subpoena, which plenty of people have done without going to jail. They are imprisoning people who speak the truth. Dinesh spoke the truth. This is why I've always held him in high regard, because he paid the price. Yeah, he violated a campaign contribution law. He should have been fined. He should have been fined. But the fact that they put him away, and they threatened, by the way, to put him away for a lot longer than that, and only when the judge was humiliated by the case notes that showed how most people were treated did he get that lighter sentence. The fantasy is that America is the bad guy. America is a great country that's done many bad things, like every single country. The West is not the bad guy. And the reason we can have this fantasy where we parade our virtue by attacking the country that is our mother, our home, the source of our freedom, the protection of our freedom. The reason we can have that fantasy is because our military is so big, we think we're immune to invasion, even as China is ramping up its navy, as Russia is trying to rebuild its empire, and as Iran tries to establish domination in the Middle East with the ultimate idea of destroying the infidels in America. And what's funny about that's the leftist fantasy. What's funny about the fantasy on the right, these Jew haters, they're just embarrassing, these people. And I almost feel sorry for them because of what they're doing to themselves, but I can't really. They keep saying, oh my God, Israel, what a terrible, terrible country, while Israel is defending us. And what's their fantasy? They think that Iran is going to come over and say, well, death to America, but not you, because you're the nice Jew-hating Americans. No, they hate you too, believe me. And they will take care of you just like they will take care of the rest of us if they ever get that powerful. The Groypers are like the feminists for Palestine and the gays for Palestine, who are dreaming that their powerful overlords will like them instead of killing them, which is what they will do. The Biden-Harris administration is doing this in Israel exactly wrong. And thank God for Bibi Netanyahu for getting it right. You have got to prioritize your health or you will not make it to 35 like I have. But it's hard to know where to start, and that's why I want to tell you about Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning to know what's going on with your metabolism, meaning whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Once that's been determined, the app gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. Forget one-size-fits-all diet fads. What sets Lumen apart is its ability to understand you on a personal level. On Backstage, Ben was talking about how he works out. I work out far, man. I can bench press Ben, and I don't have to stress about what I should be eating the morning after I eat too much or succumb to any other cravings that I can't tell you about. Lumen's ability to craft a personalized nutrition plan for each day tailored to my body's needs is revolutionary. With Lumen, you're not just getting a device, you're getting a health companion. Breathe into it before and after a workout or a meal and gain real-time insights into your body's metabolic response. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Klavan to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Klavan for 15% off your purchase. And you want to know, how do you spell me? It's Klavan. There are no E's in me if it's Klavan. There are E's if it's me, but Never mind.
There are no easy claims.
Chapter 3, nothing to see here. So I just want to show you the alchemy, the magic alchemy by which fantasy has to turn into lies, right? Fantasy fails because it's fantasy, right? Just if I say there's no gravity and I walk off a building, and then they have to tell you that you haven't fallen to the ground and are now pancaked on the pavement, they have to tell you you're absolutely fine. And so where do you go when you want to see fantasy turn into lies? Obviously, you go to Hollywood. Now, Hollywood's doing fine. They're making money. The Wolverine and What's-His-Face made money this summer, and Twisters and Inside Out and all that. They had a decent summer, but they have become irrelevant. Nobody cares what movie is coming out. Nobody's talking about the movies. Nobody's discussing them. They're not swaying anything. Nobody watches the Oscars anymore. They have destroyed what was the main source of culture in America. And they've done it because of selling this kind of leftist nonsense that people really don't want to hear about by, making every couple has to be a mixed race couple. Every hero has to be a black person. People aren't turning that off because they don't like black people, by the way. They're turning it off because they don't like being lectured by people whose children by their fourth spouse are in rehab. These are Hollywood are completely chaotic people. They're talented artists who destroy their own lives and then tell us how to live ours. They don't know. They know how to read a script and write a script and shoot a movie. They know nothing about climate change or politics, and they're lecturing us all about it. So Zach Levy, the actor from Shazam, was at an RFK rally, and he endorsed Donald Trump. And here's what he said. This is cut 11. Okay, now, obviously that's true. That's completely true. But it's not true on The View. On The View, The View is like, I always say there's a big difference between womanly and womanish. If you're womanly, you are like an elevated person, and every man will say, you can see when my wife walks into a room. I mean, my wife is a womanly woman. When my wife walks into a room, people stop, and they think, oh, now there's someone you have to pay respect. Womanish is all the bad things, like macho. It's like all the bad aspects of being womanish. And The View is just a womanish show. It's just people kind of parading and putting their fists on their hips and making these declarative sentences that are completely untrue. So here's Whoopi Goldberg doing that about Zach Levy. It's cut 12.
From the beginning of Hollywood, it's always been a very right-leaning town. But yeah. I know you don't know much about the Hollywood history, so let me school you. Uh-oh. We are, like America is, we're mixed. We're a mixed bunch. And sometimes it may seem like there's more Democrats, and sometimes it seems like there's more Republicans. But the truth of the matter is, very few people seem to bite it because they're Republican.
What crap. And she says that I'm going to school you. I'm going to tell you, you go, girl, you school us on this garbage. Now, what she's talking about when she talks about the history is, of course, Hollywood was formed by mostly Jewish, but also other people who, when they first started Hollywood, who did have conservative leanings because they were businessmen mostly, and they ran it because they had that studio system that basically kept the artists and the crazies in control. That fell apart in the 60s, and that is not the Hollywood we're living in at all now. It is a completely leftist town, 100% leftist, with the occasional, conservative keeping a low profile. And of course, so this is covered variety. Whoopi Goldberg shuts down Zachary Levy's claim, or Whoopi gets heated. This is I can't remember I can't remember which one it is, but another leftist paper. Whoopi gets heated over Shazam, stars Zachary Levy's Trump endorsement. Okay, but at the same time that's happening, this is happening. Vanity Fair is running a story. Hollywood's biggest Donald Trump endorsement might be this failed DC superhero. Shazam star Zachary Levy tepidly endorsed the Republican presidential hopeful Saturday after his chosen candidate RFK departed the race. Zachary Levy's politics have threatened to overshadow his work as an actor for years. His politics are going to overshadow, leftist politics don't overshadow your work. Given his apparent skepticism of life-saving vaccines, his criticism of the SAG-AFTRA strike, and his loud and proud support of credibly accused sexual assailant Robert F. Kennedy. That's Vanity Fair. That's a major, major source of Hollywood publicity and reputation making, going after them and destroying them. But nothing's going to happen to you if you endorse Trump. Now, look, I've told my own story, my own Hollywood story a number of times. And, I can't prove that I was blacklisted in Hollywood for my beliefs, but I can tell you the way it works, okay? Hollywood has very few jobs for millions of people who want to do what people do in Hollywood, write and act and direct and all those things. And you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get a chance to do it. You have to make friends. You have to do all this stuff that I never did. I just never did. I went on my talent alone because a writer can at least hand in a script and do it. But still, I personally know more than one person who has, sold a deal to somebody while on their way to a Hillary fundraiser or some other Democratic event. Whereas if you're a conservative, you meet in secret and you drop your voice. You're in the Friends of Abe. Nobody can know what you are. And if you come out, you're done for. Let me give you Kevin Sorbo, who was in one of the most watched TV shows of all time. I think it was Tarzan was one of the biggest shows of all time, talking what happened after he came out as a conservative and a Christian. This is cut 13.
It's crazy how the damage they can do to your career, how they can destroy people's lives right now. In 2010, there were a couple of incidents that I just said, okay, I've had enough of this. And I remember going back to my wife and saying, I've had enough of the hypocrisy where nobody's pointing it out. And I started getting more vocal. Of course, we had all these, social media was starting to grow in its infancy, but we started to take off. And I started saying stuff. My wife said, you better look out, they're gonna come after you. And I said, all I said was 2 + 2 is 4. I spoke the truth, that's just truth. But she was right. And I got to a point with my agent, who was a big-time agent, I was with a long time, and my manager just said, we can't represent you anymore.
That's an amazing thing, and that does not happen to left-wingers. It doesn't happen at all to left-wingers. And look, you just go into meetings and they insult, in the conversations, in a meeting where you're talking about business, they insult George W. Bush or Donald Trump or whatever, and you're supposed to sit there with this big crap-eating smile on your face and just take it, and I could never take it. I would always say, well, politely, because I'm an incredibly polite person, I would politely say, I'm on the other side of that question. And of course, you're not going to get that job. You are not going to get that job. And I don't resent it, but I do resent people telling me that I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. But you know what? The reason I talk about this is because I just want to talk about how the fantasies are maintained. And if you have a family, think back to the family you grew up in. If your family was at all dysfunctional, and most families have some sort of dysfunction, you will remember how you were kept from noticing that dad drank too much, or mom lied, or your parents did things they shouldn't do, or sometimes they, said things that weren't true. You were kept from noticing that. You were not allowed to notice that. It wasn't happening. So you had a Whoopi Goldberg in your family probably telling you that you shouldn't see the things you see. All these theories about manufacturing consent, which is where the press says all these things about climate change, for instance, to make you think that everybody else agrees with them. You're supposed to, when they say someone like me, they'll say, well, you have controversial opinions. I don't. I have mainstream opinions. They have controversial opinions, but they want people to believe they're controversial because that'll keep them quiet. But that's a political theory, but it works this way in family systems too. Families have ways of corralling people into the culture of that family. And this is why I'm always telling you that the truth has this tremendous power if you have the courage to speak it. And if you want to be free, you have to have that courage. And I will end with that. Worst thing I ever did, smoke cigarettes. I am so glad I gave them up, and I wish they had fume then, because flavored air is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking. The new movement toward building better habits is led by our sponsor, Fume. Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device that uses flavored air instead of vapor. Flavored air isn't like vaping. If vapor was compared to sticky soda, Fume cores are closer to herbal teas. Instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors like crisp mint, orange vanilla, maple pepper, and sparkling grapefruit. Fume helps you break bad habits by giving you something you can reach for. I tried it. It's fun. You can play with it. You can hold it just like you could something you were smoking, but it's a guilt-free alternative that doesn't use any vapor or nicotine. Plus, it's designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting because keeping your fingers busy is helpful for breaking your habit. Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code Klavan to get a free gift with your Journey Pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfume.com. FUM.com and use code Klavan to get a free gift with your order today. Klavan, you need all the letters for Klavan. It's Klavan.
There are no E's in Klavan.
Final chapter, final fantasy. So we're talking about the questions at the debate and how they established this kind of bubble of fantasy that made it very hard for Vance or any conservative to break out of in order to speak the simple truth. And they did this again when Margaret Brennan asked about families. This is cut 16.
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents.
So we're watching this at Backstage, and both Matt Walsh and I immediately reacted. We don't have a child care crisis in this country. We have a single motherhood crisis in this country and a working mother crisis in this country because some mothers can't support their family on a single salary. We have a crisis of values. It's not a crisis of government. It's, again, she goes on to say, everyone else has government childcare. That's what they want. It's always leftism. It's always about leftism. It's always let the government do what only mothers can really do. And so we don't have, again, it's a values question. And this came in, the most upsetting version of this value crisis was on abortion. This is, I know, is upsetting a lot of you, and it's upsetting me as well, that, we had this wonderful victory of overturning Roe v. Wade, which was a curse on our country, stripping babies of their right to life, basically saying this category of human being does not have a right not to be killed. That's what Roe v. Wade said. And we weren't prepared for it to be repealed because conservatives are inherently, naturally pessimistic, and nobody thought that was going to happen. And when it happened, a lot of these guys, politicians who were having a good time parading their virtue on abortion, suddenly found out that a lot of people like abortion because a lot of people are corrupted by the culture. This is a thing that happens to people when you have, you lose the culture, you lose people's hearts because the culture shapes people's hearts. And again, it doesn't matter. It is true that people's behavior changes when their ideas change, but when those ideas are false, they become false. People's behavior becomes wicked, just like people holding slaves because they think that that's an okay thing to do. So Vance was asked about abortion, and he tried to handle the question this way because Republicans are losing anywhere they stand up for the right for babies to live. There's cut 10.
I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options.
So, okay, that's mealy-mouthed, and I think, he's not coming out and saying what he means, and he talked about a woman friend he had who he loves who had an abortion because she was in an abusive relationship, and, I have tremendous compassion for women in trouble, but I also have tremendous compassion for women who have been convinced by the culture that their baby had no right to live, in the same way that I have compassion for George Washington, who was convinced most of his life that slavery was just fine. Couldn't understand why people kept escaping. This scion of liberty, this actual, hero of liberty, couldn't understand why his slaves kept escaping. That's how powerful culture is. So, and listen, if I understand that, I feel God understands it, and there will be forgiveness for people who were led astray, but not for the people by whom the trouble came, not for the people who created the culture that said those things, and not for an America that believes those things, not for a nation that believes those things. We will not be forgiven for that as a nation until we have made amends. But look, this is a values crisis. And as I said on Backstage, if we can't make a stand, for political reasons, if we can't make a stand, at least we should learn to make an argument. Because abortion and, working mothers who work instead of taking care of their children, this partakes of the biggest Marxist lie of all, which is what I said is materialism, that we're just flesh and blood. We're not souls as well. And souls are not little invisible ghosts, but they are who you are. You're who you are in time and through time and in the mind of God. And they are real. They are real in a different way than a table is real, but they are just as real. And if you don't take those souls into account, your lives stink. Going back to Hollywood, I quit a lot of jobs because they wanted me to do things I didn't want to do. The only enemy I ever made in Hollywood was the woman who later became Robert Downey Jr.'s wife. I loved her to death. She's a brilliant, lovely person to work with, but she treated screenwriters as if they basically, once they were under contract, the contract didn't matter. They should just work and work and work. And I once said, it's kind of abusive, and she hit the roof. She always hated me. I never stopped liking her, but she was really angry at me because I stood up for what I thought was the dignity of my profession and myself. But I knew a lot of people, a lot of guys who never did that and were treated like crap and crawled in the dirt and did it because they wanted that job so much, and they didn't take their souls into account. And they made more money than I did, and they had more successful movies than I did, and I would look in their eyes, and I never envied them once because I saw what was happening to them inside, okay? And that's the thing that we've been taught not to take any account of. And I look at people like Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan and David Muir and the New York Times, and I think, I know you think you're doing God's work by lying to people, but that is going to cost you, And I know, people who listen to the show regularly know that I'm going to say things to you that you hate sometimes. And you might go away while you have to work through the 5 stages of agreeing with Klavan, right? The first stage is that you disagree, that's denial. Then you have anger. Then I think you get pimples, and then you have gas. And finally, you realize that I was telling the truth, okay? But for a while, I lose you. And, I do that not only for you because I love you and I want to tell you the truth. I do it for me too, because when I wake up in the morning, I want to put my soul on and I want it to still fit. And to the people who hate Jews, when I see the things that they say such awful things on my ex posts and all this stuff. And I know Shapiro would beat me up for feeling sorry for them, but I do feel sorry for them because I know that no one can stop them from saying hateful things. No one can stop them from attacking my son because he's gay. No one can stop them from, this evil coming out of their mouth, this filth coming out of their mouth. But what do they think that does to them? What do they think they're becoming when they do that, when they do this? What do you think that abortion does? You can see what abortion does to people when they shout their abortions and when they, say, oh, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You only have to look in their eyes. You only have to look in their eyes to see what happens to them, because now, it's so interesting. Like, you may sit there and say, like, what proof do you have that you have a soul? You know what I'm saying is true. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows what it feels like when they know they're doing the wrong thing and they're telling them they're doing the right thing. And your therapist may tell you just need to take an antidepressant, or it might tell you that it's your mom, the way your mom treated you and all this stuff. But you can overcome a lot if you take care of your soul by trying to do the right thing. And, the devil has one trick. He has one trick, which is that he tells you he's going to take away your fear and make you strong. Your hatred will make you strong. When you're sitting around saying filthy things about the Jews, that's going to make you a tough guy. That's going to make you strong. And your lies will make you strong. When you're at the New York Times and you're writing about, yet one more article about how Donald Trump isn't fit to be president, that's going to make you, you're a strong guy. Or your abortion is going to make you free and strong because you didn't have to live a life where you found some other way of taking care of that child or having that child adopted. And inside, you get weaker and weaker and weaker, and you get shamed in your weakness, because now, if you let go of that fantasy that you're being strong, what have you got? You're going to have to face the weakness and the twistedness and the fact that you become something that you never, ever wanted to be. Everything comes with a price. Everything comes with a price. We never discuss this in America, but it's just true. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Nothing is free. And sometimes the price is money, sometimes it's power, but a lot of times you get money and you get power, but you lose your soul. What does it help you to gather the whole world, to gain the whole world, if you lose your soul? And if there's a price on your soul, if there's a price that you pay for your soul, that is a reality much deeper than some money you might have sacrificed, some power you might have sacrificed, some freedom you might have sacrificed by having to take care of a baby or find somebody to adopt a baby. This is the thing we have to start talking about, because this is the greatest fantasy of all, that all of these things are free. They are not. The lies, the cheating, the deceptions, the seizing of power, the holding on to power, all of these things come as a soul price, and it is the greatest price of all. We are just a month away now from the 2024 election, and this is the time to join DailyWire Plus. Get 47% off with code FIGHT at dailywire.com/subscribe. DailyWire Plus gives you unlimited access to the truth with uncensored daily shows, free from ads or moderators. Stay informed with live breaking news coverage and the kind of hard-hitting investigative journalism that the left doesn't want you to see. This deal is for a very limited time, so don't wait. Join the fight now and take advantage of 47% off new memberships. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code FIGHT for your exclusive discount. That's dailywire.com/subscribe, code FIGHT for 47% off new Daily Wire Plus memberships. All right, Klavan Klapbacks.
I've become friends with school shooters.
Yes, he has. And I believe that. I really do. All right, Klavan Klapbacks. If you want to be in Klavan Klapbacks, I want to talk about this for just a minute. A couple of people, a number of people actually, have come up and complained that I no longer answer as many personal questions. This is happening in my life. What do I do about it? They say those were very helpful. You can send those in to Klavan Klapbacks, and we will find them if they're interesting and different, and say something that is important. I will answer personal questions as well. It's Klavan Klapbacks at dailywire.com. Klavan, obviously with a K. Klapbacks, also with a K. Klavan Klapbacks at dailywire.com. You can talk about the show, but you can also talk about your personal life. I will take questions like that. Today, one of my favorite letters we've ever gotten, one of my favorite questions we've ever gotten, and it's not a personal one, but it's really interesting. It's from David. He says, hard to communicate how big a fan I am. I have no trouble believing Jesus walked the earth and that the Gospels give us some important quotes and a basic outline of what happened to Jesus. However, you have been very clear in your memoir at the New Jerusalem, which is the Substack I write with Spencer, and the show, that the historical fact of Jesus was key to your conversion, and if I'm understanding you correctly, your continuing faith. It just doesn't bother me one way or the other. It could all be made up. So what? From David. The reason I like this question so much is that I understand the issue, and it's an important one, which is this. C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien said that the story of Jesus was a myth that really happened. And like any other myth, it says serious truths, speaks serious truths about human life in the world and our relationship with our spirit and our relationship with God and all of these things that it says are true. And it is deeply true whether or not Jesus lived or not. Those things describe our life. Take truths like, for instance, we can't know God as he is, but can only know him as humans know him, which is what the incarnation is about in some degree. Take the fact that if God were to come into the world, he would be killed because his values are antithetical to the values of the world, and yet, though he was killed, his truth would live on. All of these things remain true whether Jesus ever lived or not. So why do we have to believe that he lived? It's an excellent, excellent question. And here's my response, and my response. Obviously, there are different kinds of truth. There's all kinds of different ways of things that we would call truth. So if I'm William Shakespeare and I come over your house and I say, I want to describe my new play to you, it's called Hamlet, and it's about this prince in Denmark, and this happens and that happens, and then he says this, and then he says that. You're listening to this and you're saying, wow, that story is full of truth. That is such a true story, amazing story. Was there really a prince of Denmark who had to avenge his father's death? And I'm like, no, I'm William Shakespeare. I'm a playwright. That's a story I made up. I'm telling you about my new play. And you go, oh yeah, of course. But it's a great play. It's a great play. It really tells the truth. Now, what if I come over your house and I say, we're still William Shakespeare, and I say, I was coming over to tell you about my new play, Hamlet. And while I was coming over, I saw a burning building. And on the fourth floor, there were children stuck inside the burning building. And I ran into the fire. I ran up the floor. The smoke was crowding. I was coughing and choking, but I managed to get those children, and I carried them through the flames, and I got them out. Now it kind of matters whether that story is actually physically true or not. And what's the difference? Well, now I'm not just telling you about things that may or may not have happened. I am telling you something about the nature of myself, the true nature of myself. If that story is true, if I ran into a building and rescued 2 children from a fire, I'm a hero. I'm a really decent person who has something really special inside me. If that story is not true, I am the lowest possible kind of liar, and you can't believe in me at all, okay? So if the story of Jesus is a true myth, and it is true as a myth, then you're kind of in a position I don't want to speak for Jordan Peterson. He's well able to speak for himself, but this is how I understand Jordan. This is the position that he is in. You're living as if it's true because it is true about the human experience. It is an inner truth that comes out of us into the world. It's a truth about human nature and human experience of what we think about God. However, to live according to Christian principles is to take great risks with your life. It is to risk your life in many ways. It's to not have an abortion, even though that's going to make your life much, much harder. It's to not tell lies to get a job in Hollywood or tell lies to keep your audience share up. It's not to cheat your employees, even though that might make your business work better. It's not to cheat your boss, even though that might make your job easier. It is to live in a different way. And in order to do that, you have to have faith that the story is true from the outside, just like the story of somebody running into a fire. You have to understand that what your experience is of Jesus is true, but it's an experience of something that is true both inwardly and outwardly. And then you're ready to have faith. You can't know that it's true outwardly because nobody can see God, but if you have faith with it, then you are suddenly free to live your life. And that is why people who believe, well, yes, there's a lot of truth in Jesus, do not get the joy and the sorrow of being a Christian, and why people who take that leap of faith sometimes have a harder time, but end up with a much deeper soul, a much richer experience of life, and a much greater joy. And that's the reason that you have to believe. So again, it's Klavan Klapbacks at DailyWire.com, Klavan with a K, Klapbacks with a K at DailyWire.com. And now, let me encourage you to become a member once again. You can go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. And you might say, well, why should I do that? And it's because Klavanlessness is hell. That's what Jesus meant when he said, that's what he meant when he said, don't be afraid of the person who can kill the body. Be afraid of the person who can throw you into Klavanlessness. That's what okay, I'm making that up. But still, if you want to become a member at dailywire.com/subscribe, use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. If you are a member already, congratulations. It is not time yet for Klavanlessness. It is time for Member Block.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you.
Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yeah, this country is a piece of
white
folks,
white
trash, white supremacy, white woman, white boy.
Is there a black person around?
What's a black person right here? Does he not exist?
Say I'm racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Matt.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist.
In theaters now, rated PG-13.